Hi, I'm Heather Tedesco, and I'm a psychologist in private practice in McLean, and I work with parents. And I'm also a member of the Mental Health Committee for the Safe Community Coalition. And this video is part of the Managing the Moment series. And I'm thrilled to be here with my colleague and good friend, Jennifer Weaver.
Hi, Heather.
Hi.
Thanks for having me join you.
Happy to have you.
I'm Jennifer Weaver. I'm a psychotherapist here in McLean with a private practice that focuses on children, adolescents, and young adults.
And Jennifer and I, along with our other friend and colleague, Dr. Catherine McCarthy, have been thinking a lot the past few months about the pandemic and how we can help families manage their way through the pandemic.
One of the things I love about our collaboration together, the three of us, when we've been talking, and we've been talking because we're really concerned about what's been going on with the pandemic, what this is doing for kids, adolescents, and their families, but also, like you say, the opportunities that there are there to really be building some resilience during this difficult time. And I love how you talk about resilience, and I love how you describe it. Are you able to share a little bit about sort of your conceptualization? It's a word that's tossed around a lot in sort of pop psychology, but you have a more sort of true scientific view.
Oh, thank you. It's interesting because resilience is such a buzzword, and in a sense, resilience is comprised of a whole bunch of, kind of psychological characteristics. Resilience is essentially it's the ability to bounce back, the ability to cope with adversity, the ability to recover from adversity. It's sort of the ability to ride the roller coaster that is life, and to be able to manage both the downs and the ups.
Yeah.
And so for our kids to be resilient, it's not this one thing that we can just hand to them. It's a whole bunch of different qualities that we want to build and encourage in them.
And different kids come with different sort of set points for resilience
Yes.
from the beginning, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And one of the keys to parenting always is to know the child that you have.
Yeah.
And to understand that if you have more than one child, each child is different, even when they're raised in the same family. And, we really have to honor the temperament and, the individual that's in front of us.
And you believe that no matter where their sort of set point temperament is sort of naturally, you believe everyone can grow resilience?
Absolutely, absolutely. There's no question. And we adults can grow our resilience
Yeah.
as well. and one of the best ways that we can encourage things in our kids is to practice them ourselves. And so that is for sure one of the keys to resilience is to model our own resilience and to work on our own resilience.
Yeah, for sure, especially during this time.
Yes, absolutely. And, along with the many challenges that we have under the current pandemic conditions, it is a phenomenal opportunity, actually, to build something like resilience because our resilience is being tested every single day. Life is different and in many ways harder than it was a few months ago. And the interesting thing is that when we work on building certain characteristics in ourselves, when we do that under duress, when we do that under adversity, we actually supercharge it and we build it better. And so that's why, we've talked so much about this pandemic offering such an amazing opportunity actually to families to work on resilience.
I love Dr. McCarthy's take on the idea, the metaphor of athletes, like Olympic athletes who might train at really high altitudes, like they might spend a lot of their time training at high altitudes to really build that lung capacity. So like under the hardest of conditions, and then in their real races, wherever they may be, they've got that extra something.
Yes, exactly. I think that's the perfect way to think about this time and the perfect way to think about resilience. We've had an awful lot of resilience stories highlighted lately, and that's another one of the keys is to, if we're going to build this and encourage it in our kids, we need to discuss it. We need to pay attention to it.
Yeah.
We need to show them that we value it. And, it's a great time to look for, kind of as Mr. Rogers said, right? Look for the helpers. Highlight the people that are, finding ways to not just survive, but to thrive, because it is possible to thrive under difficult circumstances. That's part of the human spirit that's in everybody.
Yeah.
So why don't we start, Jennifer, just by talking about some of the basic things that parents can be doing. Anyone who's heard me talk has heard me talk about the things that underlie motivation. 3 simple things from self-determination theory, which is competence, connection, and autonomy. These are critical foundations for resilience because we can't bounce back from adversity if we don't believe in ourselves, if we don't think that we're capable. And so for our kids, we need to make sure that they are getting some sense of what they're good at, that they're feeling capable and competent. That competence gives them confidence. That confidence fuels their self-esteem and makes them more motivated to be able to do what's hard, which is handle these challenges. And so I always tell parents that we need to pay more attention to what they're good at, focusing on the strengths than on the deficits. And it's different than how we adults work. We adults tend to be very efficient. We tend to, kind of go right to the problem and try and solve the problem. But, our kids really benefit from some focus on the strengths. Do you agree?
I do. I definitely do. One of the things from the more child adolescent perspective, a lot of what we see at my practice are kids who come in. One of the things we call it is low frustration tolerance, not being able to sort of have that bounce back quality. And some kids just naturally have that, and some kids have less of that, but it doesn't mean that they can't build that. And so families often will come to us and ask about that. And it's one of the things we work on a lot in even play therapy with young children. And yes, those characteristics around feeling competent, feeling some autonomy, and feeling that connection, those three things happen in both play therapy with a therapist and also when we teach parents to play with their kids to build those three things.
Yes.
So frequently you'll have a child maybe building a tower or Legos or something, and then they're struggling with some piece. It's actually, we have a joke in our office that a lot of times it's the Connect 4 game of just putting the little eggs on before we even play the game. And a child will be working it and working it and working it and maybe start to have some uncomfortable feelings or some frustration. And our natural inclination as parents is to get in there and be like, oh, let me help you, let me show you how that's done. Which is fine, but the play therapist who's built, if you're working on frustration tolerance with a kid, the play therapist will sit there, name their feelings, and do nothing. So I'll sit there and say, oh, that's hard. Oh, you didn't get it. Oh, this is so frustrating. And no problem solving, no suggestions, none of that. Yeah. The connection is there, I'm with them. The assumption of competence is there because I'm not swooping in to do the thing.
Absolutely.
I'm assuming they will get there or they'll ask for help.
Yeah.
And I'm tolerating the feeling of the frustration. And I think that's really one of the keys.
Yes, for sure. And what you describe is so common with parents that we all have that innate, both sort of our adult problem solving capacity and then our immense love and motivation to help our kids. It's extremely difficult in those moments of struggle to turn that off. And yet, sometimes I'll say to parents that independence is a little bit of a seesaw, which is that, if one person's in charge, the other person's not. And so, if we want our kids to feel that they are completely in control, and we do, because that sense of autonomy is crucial to well-being. And so we want them to feel like they have control. We have to let go. We have to step back. And the way you describe
that's a great way to put it. You can't both be in charge, so you got to step. If you want them to build that, you got to step back.
Yes.
And with little things around toys, and then later with adolescents when they come to you with a problem with a friend or whatever. So often I think, and it's funny because we see that a lot around here, where kids tend to actually know how they have a lot of language for their feelings, which is awesome. That's part of the deal of resilience, is you need to know how you feel even if you feel crappy.
Yeah.
If you feel frustrated, if you feel angry, if you feel sad, if you feel hurt, if you feel lonely. But that next step is, I think, we tend to try to help. I have a friend who calls it early rescue. Don't rescue too early.
Yes.
Rather than the implication of not rescuing, there's this underlying thing of, I believe in you.
Yes.
I know you have not just the capacity to fix it, but to not fix it and be okay.
Yes. That's so crucial, that point, because it's one of the things that you talk beautifully about is the idea that when we want to share our examples of our own personal struggle, we parents have this desire to like put a little happy ending on it and tie it up neatly in a bow. And, you know, in a weird way, that almost makes it harder for our kids, right?
Yes.
Because it presents to them this idea that it should all turn out okay. And sometimes
Right.
it doesn't. Tell me how you kind of coach kids and their parents through that.
Well, one thing that you and I have talked a lot about that I like to focus on with families is that shift from outcome to process.
Yeah.
Rather than talking to kids about their successes and or failures as an event that like, oh, well, you got an A. Oh, well, you got a C. Maybe you better study harder. That the focus is not, that focusing on outcome scares kids for the
Yes.
next time.
Yes.
Am I going to do well or am I not? Am I going to do well or am I not? And that can create a lot of anxiety and a lack of that
Yes.
bounce back quality
Yes.
because it feels like the thing that's important is the outcome.
Yes.
And the thing that's
Yeah.
actually important is the process and
Yes.
the stick-to-itiveness.
Yes.
And somebody who gets a C on a test who really stuck with it, that you learn so much more from that than the A.
Yes.
Those are real opportunities also. Similarly to the pandemic, academic opportunities often present us, and social opportunities
Yes.
present us with ability to tolerate feeling uncomfortable and just be like, that's part of life.
Yes.
There don't have to be solutions and fixes. And a lot of times I think also we as parents, and I know I do this as a parent as well, is what I want to say is, oh, what could you have done next time? And I don't know if that's the best question to ask.
Yeah.
What do you
Because it-
suggest instead?
Yeah, because it implies, you know, again, you did something wrong.
Yeah.
You did something, you know, that wasn't. We're so focused on optimizing and trying to make everything perfect.
Yeah.
Actually, one of the things I talk all the time about with resilience is failure. We need to be comfortable with failure. We need to help our kids. We need to teach them that failure is an opportunity for growth. It's not something to be afraid of. And honestly, if we aren't setting goals that we fail at initially, then we're not really challenging ourselves appropriately. And so, you know, it's important, you know, for parents to understand, first of all, that kids are more capable than we give them credit for. You know, we are innate in our desire to problem solve for them and to do too much for them, which comes from a very good place. But, you know, kind of buried in there is a sort of a vote of no confidence. And you just were saying how important it is for our kids to feel that we believe in them. There's good research that shows that, you know, we can kind of live up or down to expectations within a certain range. And so believing in our kids is more valuable than assisting our kids. Being able to tolerate our kids' distress is more valuable than fixing their distress.
Right.
Um,
As uncomfortable as it is for us.
It's incredibly uncomfortable. We, you know, when I talk to parents, I say this is going to be, it's going to be so much harder to do nothing and to say nothing. So much harder, you know? But it is so important. And our kids need to understand, as you say, sort of the process, the growth mindset. You know, Carol Dweck's research that shows that, again, it is, you know, the opposite of resilience. It makes us brittle. If we are too worried about the outcome, it limits us. And, you know, no parent wants to limit their kids. And so being able to recognize that every parent I've talked to has said they want resilient kids. But you don't just sort of get resilient kids. The same way you can't just, you know, tell your kids that they're great and build their self-esteem.
Right.
The only way to get our kids to be resilient is to allow them sort of the ups and downs and to prepare them for both the highs and the lows, and then to stand back and, you know, kind of, again, kind of lovingly, be a loving presence, but not be, you know, kind of out there on the playing field, actively involved with them.
One of the things that I notice so often, and it actually gives me so much hope, is when I talk to kids and I'm playing with kids or talking with adolescents about issues. As a psychotherapist, I have the ability, it's my job to step back and listen and not be a problem solver. And what's interesting to me is I can sit there and think of 5 things that they might do instead, and think of solutions or ways they could reframe how they're thinking about the situation or other feelings. But if I'm quiet and if I just am curious about them and their process, one of the things I find is they come up with their own solutions that are way more interesting than mine.
Yes.
They tend to be more creative. They tend to be personal to them.
Yeah.
It makes me think of those the old marshmallow test
yes.
thing about building up the ability to delay gratification.
Yes.
That when you see the little kids who do well,
Yeah.
they tend to all have a different strategy
Yes.
that's very creative to them.
Yes.
One sings a little song to the marshmallow, one doesn't look at the marshmallow, one does a little dance. They're not necessarily things I would have suggested to a child about how to delay gratification. They come up with, and when it's personal to the child or the adolescent, their own solution, that's part of that competence and autonomy that
Yeah.
you're talking about.
Yeah.
But it's also, I think, more potent for them because it's personalized. They've personalized
Absolutely.
their own stuff.
Well, it's so true, and the beauty of it is that it's got the motivation baked into it. You know,
Yeah.
I always tell parents, you know, that you know, behavior is eminently changeable, but it requires sort of awareness and knowledge along with motivation. And I hear all the time from parents, my child's not motivated. Of course your child is motivated. All kids are motivated, but their goals differ from ours as parents
Right.
much of the time. And
They may be highly motivated to make it to the next level of Fortnite.
Exactly, but that is motivation.
It
and
is.
for sure,
It is.
when we let our kids come up with their own solutions, as you say, they're personal, they fit them better.
Yeah.
And they also have buy-in right from the get-go. So, you know, the hard part's done. So absolutely. I sometimes tell parents that they need to channel their inner Jeopardy contestant. You know, we're built to problem solve, and a lot of parents they actually sort of need to be freed from that.
Yeah.
They believe that their job as parent is to have the answers.
Yes.
And you know, you and I both have 3 kids. We know that we do not have all the answers.
No kidding.
You know, we all get humbled over time
Yes.
by our kids. And the sooner that we parents can allow ourselves to step out of that responsibility of feeling like we have to have the solutions for our kids, then we can, you know, kind of sit back and do exactly what you recommend, which is so wise, to let our kids come up with their own problem, their own solutions, and we can cue them, and that's sort of the Jeopardy contestant. I always say put it in the form of a question. You know, if we want our kids to be autonomous, then they have to be trying on the solutions. They have to be, you know, figuring out what works for them.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that we're completely invisible. We
Right.
can be a part of the process. We can collaborate with them. We can give them our ideas even when they're stuck. But there is a world of difference between telling them what to do, declarative sentence, and asking them what they think about a particular possibility. And
Yep.
that's where, from even the youngest ages, I think we want to be. Do you agree?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Asking them what they think, asking them. And sometimes kids can be very trapped in their own self. And so sometimes asking questions to just open it up
Yeah.
of, well, what would your friend say
Yeah.
if what do you think I think about
Yeah.
this problem? What do you think I would suggest? What do you think your dad would suggest? Things like that to open it up. Or if they're very concerned about how other people are seeing the situation, what do you think? What do you
Yes.
actually think to be able to
Yes.
balance that self and
Yes.
other piece?
Yeah.
And focus on the hardness of things.
Yes.
I think 2 things that parents can really, if the advice is do less, there are still things like, you know, to do. Be curious.
Yeah.
Move from being a supervisor to more of a consultant role.
Yes.
You're a supervisor when it comes to their safety. You're
Yes.
a supervisor, you know, but around things like this, being more of a curious consultant is sometimes a good shift for parents. And focusing on what kids struggled with rather than what kids did well.
Yeah. It's so well said, and I think again it's difficult because I know, you know, a lot of well-intentioned parents are sort of looking for what the rules are and trying to follow the rules. And so, you know, they start off thinking they need to, you know, kind of build up their kids' self-esteem, and so they try to do a lot of praise. And yes, we are saying, you know, to some degree pay attention to your kids' competence. But what you're saying is so crucial, which is we have to be real, we have to be authentic, and we have to be true to life as it is.
Yes.
Because eventually our kids leave us and go live their life. And
Right.
so if we over focus on the positive,
Right.
if we over focus on their strengths, then we can sort of set them up to, you know, carry the wrong idea about, you know, what it's like to struggle. And so I love how you say that. You know, when I talk to parents about independence, I think again, we hear independence and we think, oh, they should be able to take care of themselves. And, you know, some people are like, all right, they need to be able to have these life skills, et cetera. But problem solving, emotional, being able to tolerate your own distress.
Yeah.
These are crucial forms of independence.
Yeah, absolutely. A thing that I often also hear, I hear this a lot from adolescents actually, is there is sort of a mystery as to how their parents got to where they were.
Yeah.
Because I think we as parents have a habit of telling stories, or so I'll have a kid who may be struggling about getting into a college that they're excited about or worried about that, and they'll say, "Oh, well, it was easy for my parents. They did this, and they knew all along that they wanted to be an engineer, and blah 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 blah." But when you talk to the parents, it's not how it went at all.
Yes.
Sometimes there were just tons of disasters along the way. I would love to see parents share more of the disasters, and not disasters necessarily with a happy ending.
Yes.
I mean, maybe there's a happy ending and that everybody's sitting around the dinner table and there's food to eat and a roof over your head and those kinds of things. I don't mean to imply a long-term disaster, but like focusing on how difficult things have been for them, that the path is not straight, that paths are crooked, that things that look like it was very obvious from A to B was probably A to L to X to blah, blah, blah. That builds resilience in kids because they can see that their parents had to have resilience to get where they are.
Yeah, and it's a great point. I often kind of say the same to parents, but a funny thing is that our brains make that more difficult than you'd imagine. We tend, the way that we process memory is that we tend to forget the struggle. We leave it out in sort of our, and so as parents, we have to know to do this. It's not just recounting
we have to
our
remember
stories.
our own
We do.
difficulties.
We do, yes. So that we can present it to kids. But you're so right. Tell me more. I'm curious, since I only talk to parents, you actually get to hear from the kids. What else do you think parents need to know around resilience? What do you hear from their kids?
I think kids often have a skewed idea of what's going on with their parents. And when you were talking earlier about you got a model for your self-resilience, I was thinking, I think lots of parents who are engaged in resilience all the time aren't necessarily sharing that part, even not just from their past, but even just from their daily life. And being able to say, oh, I just came from the PTA meeting, and I made this point, and then I realized that I was really off topic, or I'd missed the beginning of the meeting, and it was so embarrassing. And being able to just share those moments of struggle that you might just have in your everyday life. And so what are you doing? You're modeling the fact that you also were nervous or embarrassed or maybe even humiliated or rageful behind the wheel or whatever. And there's a shoulder shrugging quality to that, right? Yes. That's what we want to send is feelings are deep, feelings are painful. What are you going to do? You now we're going to move on.
Yes.
And you also might then that next month say, I have to go back to the PTA meeting. I don't want to. It was so bad last time. Yeah. And one of the most beautiful things I love is when then the adolescent soothes the adult, soothes the parent, and says, oh, Mom, I bet it wasn't that bad. It always makes, you always think it's worse than other people think. That builds resilience in kids, too, when they can be sharing a little bit of their own give their own advice.
Absolutely. Again, they do have really good ideas.
Yeah.
Our kids see us so much more clearly than we often see ourselves, and to be able to allow that, to allow our
to not hide our own struggles.
Yes.
I think especially during the pandemic, this has been something that I actually think has been really fruitful.
Yeah.
Which is that because we're all trapped together for so long, I've had parents and kids say to me, I've had kids say to me, I had no idea what my, mother's job is like, or if they're living with their aunt, what their aunt's job is like. And now I see, I can hear them on the phone and think that, Yeah. But we're so on top of each other also, I think. One of the things I'm finding is happening is people will sort of emerge from their rooms with their screens and go have lunch or grab something to eat or whatever. And there's a confusion around feelings where feelings are getting tangled up in each other's. I might be annoyed at something that happened at work. My daughter might be frustrated with something that happened in her class. And I could even take it personally because she's just grumbly or whatever. So sometimes I think being able to say out loud, I actually just had a really frustrating situation, so better not talk to me right now. Again, as resilience building too. I'm holding this. I'm keeping this. I'm going to contain it. I'm not going to barf it all over you.
Yes.
And would you mind not doing the same?
Please don't.
Yes.
Absolutely. So, we've hit on a whole lot of different pieces of resilience, and we'll give you a handy little link to a handout that lists them out more specifically. But again, I would just say that, resilience, it's two sides of a coin. You have the, kind of the coping well and, recovery piece, but you also have to have the failing. And, failing well is a thing too, right?
Yes, it sure is. And validating, but still providing some optimism to me is a great formula. Where that sounds really hard. I wonder what you're thinking you're going to do, or that sounds really hard. Maybe there is nothing to do. I wonder how you're going to cope tonight.
Yes.
What are you going to do to take care of yourself?
Yes, and that's a great question, right? And again, it's a time where we need to be creative because the things that, the things we used to do are often not available. Right. And so it's a time that, we can learn from our kids. They can, it's a great opportunity, frankly, right now for our kids to lead us, because they are so much more in the moment and so much less, they're not as constrained as we adults are by all of our previous experience, all of our expectations, it's a gift to be sort of so, grounded in the moment that they are.
I'm really excited actually for this generation. The pandemic is obviously a crisis and a tragedy, and so many families are suffering in so many deep ways. But there is, and so I don't mean to downplay that, but there is an opportunity here for this generation of kids to dig deep, bounce back, find their own resources, be exercising at high altitude emotionally, socially, academically, and I am excited to see what kind of adults these guys are going to make. They may really help us out.
I completely agree, and one of the things that you and I and Kathy McCarthy have talked a lot about is, as we sort of thought we were going to think about how can we help kids and how can we help families, what we really figured out is that it always starts with us, right, as parents. And so I think the last kind of idea that I would offer is to think about, anybody watching this video, think about how you're managing the pandemic. What's your pandemic story of resilience? How have you adjusted? How have you adapted? How have you been flexible? Are you finding gratitude? Because we know that, being grateful is a crucial piece of well-being and of coping.
Yes.
Are you being compassionate to yourself and others? What are you showing your kids? Because they are watching.
Right.
Now more than ever, right?
Right.
They are all there and they are watching.
Right. So show them the good and also show them the ugly, because it's all there, and show them that resilience that you have.
Yes.
That's really great.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for talking with me.
It's fun to talk to you
Good
about
to
this,
see you.
Heather. It's good to
Yes.
see you too.